And now on BBC One, the BBC News with Sophie Raworth.
At 6, the Prime Minister sets out his 5 promises to help build a better future for Britain. In a major speech, Rishi Sunak focuses on easing serious problems in the NHS, as well as cutting inflation and growing the economy.
The cost of living, too high. Waiting times in the NHS, too long. Illegal migration, far too much.
We'll be analysing the detail in his promises, also on the programme. More than 160,000 people have paid their last respects to the former Pope, Benedict XVI, ahead of his funeral at the Vatican tomorrow. The prolific novelist Faye Weldon, who wrote more than 30 books, has died at the age of 91.
I've never seen the like! Come on, Spilly boy!
And a thrilling finish at the World Darts Championships as England's Michael Smith triumphs for the first time and the crowd go wild.
On BBC London, more strike disruption as railway workers, bus drivers, highway officers and driving examiners take industrial action across the capital.
Good evening. In a major speech to start the year, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has focused on the NHS, the cost of living and the economy as he set out a fresh vision for his government with 5 pledges to voters. Rishi Sunak promised to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop illegal channel crossings. The government has been under huge pressure on the NHS and the Prime Minister said reforms were coming and that something has to change. Labour called him the do-nothing Prime Minister and said the country was entitled to ask, is that it? Our political editor, Chris Mason, reports.
We've had thousands and thousands of pounds of business lost, spread over many, many weeks, all year.
This is the first time I've actually had to go and ask for help. I just can't do it at the minute.
I had to take him out in the rain into the hospital to have the x-ray and then bring him back into the ambulance. The system seems completely broken.
It might be a new year, but last year's problems confront us seemingly everywhere. The Prime Minister claims he gets it.
New Year should be a time of optimism and excitement. Yet I know many of you look ahead to 2023 with apprehension. I want you to know that as your Prime Minister, I will work night and day to change that, and quickly.
The health service this winter confronts immense pressures. Can any of us be confident it'll be there for us, our families, if we suddenly need it?
People are understandably anxious when they see ambulances queuing outside hospitals. You should know we're taking urgent action, increasing bed capacity by 7,000 more hospital beds and more people cared at home. Providing new funding to discharge people into social care in the community, freeing up beds.
This was pointedly a speech that tried to look beyond the array of what many see as crises happening now, to set out what Rishi Sunak is about and hopes to achieve.
5 promises. We will halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the boats. Those are the people's priorities. They are your government's priorities, and we will either have achieved them or not.
From migrant crossings to the economy, Rishi Sunak tried to set targets he can be measured against. He also tried to tell us a bit about what drives him. Education, an aspiration all young people in England study maths in some form until they're 18. His anger at antisocial behaviour, albeit without new specific ideas to tackle it. And then there was this.
But family is something politicians struggle to talk about, because you can all too readily be pilloried for being out of touch. But whatever your family looks like, it doesn't matter, as long as the common bond is love.
The health service is under extraordinary pressure right now, and some people watching this afternoon might say, is that it? How soon will things improve in the NHS this winter?
What I want the country to know is this is an absolute priority for me. I made 5 promises today, and making sure that people can get the care that they need as quickly as they need it is right there as one of those priorities. The country should hold me to account for delivering it, and I'm confident that we will.
You'll notice there was no commitment there to a time frame for things improving in the NHS this winter. Labour claim the Prime Minister is out of touch.
The Conservatives have been in charge now for 13 years. That's a very long time to make change in our country. And the problems that we see today, whether it's in the NHS or in our schools or in our communities where it comes to crime, come down to a failure over those last 13 years.
The Prime Minister returned to Downing Street, his stall set out. Tomorrow it'll be Keir Starmer's turn to offer Labour's alternative vision. Chris Mason, BBC News in East London.
Well, let's stay with the NHS because the Prime Minister said that NHS waiting lists were too long and promised they would fall with people getting the care they need more quickly. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, is here with me now. Is it achievable?
Well, Sophie, it's a big ask and a stretching target. Last year, ministers were saying that the total waiting list in England, currently 7.2 million, would carry on rising right up until early next year before starting to turn around. And if anything, since that prediction, things have got harder. There are more COVID patients in hospitals than anticipated. Flu's having a serious impact this winter. And of course, there are strikes, all factors which are limiting the number of operations which can be carried out. So it's very possible that the trend won't turn around till after the spring of next year. And then we get very close to the end of the Parliament at the end of the year. So those monthly figures are going to be watched very closely in Downing Street. Mr Sunak also talked about measures that have been put in place to support the NHS now, 7,000 extra hospital beds. That was actually announced by the NHS in England last August. Also a fund to help get patients more quickly out of hospitals into the community. Not all that money has been paid over yet. So some might say, even with all those measures referred to, look at the scenes we're getting right now in A&E units and ambulances queuing at hospitals.
Hugh, thank you. Let's talk to our political editor, Chris Mason in Westminster. So, Chris, that's the NHS. He made 5 big promises in total. Are they deliverable?
It's a big question, isn't it, how deliverable they are, not least because when you look at this speech in the round, it was quite striking how big picture it was, given the crises, as many see them, happening right here and right now. This felt like a party conference speech that Rishi Sunak wasn't able to give because he was cast briefly into political oblivion last autumn, having lost the race to be Prime Minister, only to be politically reincarnated. That sense that he is still introducing himself to the country. As for those promises, some do look achievable, others a little vague, others, though, speak to the gravity of the situation we find ourselves in. So if the economy can grow at some point this year or by the end of this year to keep that promise, that could still mean potentially month after month after month of recession. The big challenge for Rishi Sunak, given the political and the economic inheritance that he's taken on, is can he deliver enough quickly enough on a tight time frame with the general election now within 2 years. Tomorrow it'll be Keir Starmer's turn to set out his alternative vision as both men grapple, if you like, to be seen to be the competent and potentially inspiring managers of a rather gloomy era.
Chris Mason, thank you. A number of business groups have been meeting the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, to discuss what government support they will get with energy bills after March, when the current support scheme expires. It's understood help will continue until next year, but at a significantly reduced rate. However, the warmer weather we're experiencing of late means there's some good news for households amid predictions that domestic bills may rise by less than previously thought. Our business editor, Simon Jack, is here to tell us more. Simon.
Thank you, Sophie. Yes, just as households have seen their energy bills subsidised during this energy crisis, non-domestic users, that's businesses, local authorities, charities, etc., have also had government support with their bills. Now, the budget watchdog estimates that support will have cost £18.4 billion by the end of the March. And the Chancellor made it clear today that support for business will be significantly lower from April. He said today, no government can permanently shield businesses from this energy price shock, and the current level of support is unsustainably expensive. Now, it just so happens that the cost of subsidising business should go down anyway, because energy is much cheaper now than at the height of the crisis. You can see here just how far this is wholesale energy prices have fallen. Now, what we don't know is exactly where prices for businesses will be fixed, which industries may get more support than others. More detail on that to come next week. But those falling prices may also see household bills increase by less than previously thought. Now, under the government's energy price guarantee, a typical household will pay £2,500 a year until March, minus £400, which all households get off. Now, that will rise to £3,000 a year from April, but the latest estimates from leading analysts suggest a typical bill may only go up to £2,800 in the autumn of this year. Now, that's still 3 times higher than its long-term average, but a bit less, so costing households a bit less than thought and costing the government a lot less in subsidies. But the bottom line here is that business costs are going to rise, household incomes are still falling, and that's a recipe for a very challenging 2023. Sophie.
Simon, thank you. The funeral of the former Pope Benedict XVI will take place tomorrow. More than 60,000 people are expected to attend. His successor, Pope Francis, will preside over the service. Britain's most senior cleric at the Vatican has suggested that Benedict's death could allow Pope Francis to think about stepping down. Our religion editor Alim Makboul is at the Vatican for us now. Alim.
Yes, Sophie, and the doors did close here just a few moments ago, and already the Vatican has told us that over the 3 days that Benedict XVI's body was lying in state in St. Peter's Basilica behind me, 195,000 people filed past, so many taking this moment to reflect. And even though the Pope Emeritus stepped down back in 2013, his passing could still mark something of a change here at the Vatican going forward. In one part of the Vatican, Pope Francis was making an appearance in his weekly audience. He started by paying tribute to his predecessor, whose funeral he'll lead tomorrow. A very short distance away, thousands were taking their final opportunity to file past Benedict XVI lying in state. After his burial, for the first time in nearly a decade, there'll be only one Pope in the Vatican. So what has having the former Pope around been like for the current incumbent? We asked one of those closest to him.
It does have an effect. There's a presence there, which is undeniable. I don't think it's obstructed Pope Francis in any way. He's done and said and decided what he wanted to do. But it's a powerful presence of your predecessor. I think most of us have been in the situations where there's a bit of a shadow from our predecessor, and maybe people make comparisons and people say, well, we did it differently in the past.
In recent months, Pope Francis has struggled with mobility. There was speculation he was reluctant to consider resigning while Pope Benedict was around, and that he might now consider that option more freely.
If we had 3 popes, that would be, we have to say, a little bit difficult to manage, I would say. But now that Pope Benedict has gone to the Lord, I think that, yes, Pope Francis will stick to those principles that he's established, that he will continue in this ministry as long as he believes and sees that he is capable.
Pope Francis has always shown immense respect for his predecessor. In the morning, tens of thousands of people will pour into St. Peter's Square to join him in laying Benedict XVI to rest. Alim Makboul, BBC News at the Vatican.
The time is coming up to 6:15, our top story this evening. The Prime Minister sets out his 5 promises for this Parliament, including cutting NHS waiting lists, reducing inflation and growing the economy. And Michael Smith is victorious for the first time in an epic final at the PDC World Darts Championship.
And on BBC London, how the pandemic's changed our working week in the city, with most in the office from Tuesday to Thursday. And a South London teenager hoping to horse ride her way to the Paralympics.
Russia says a missile attack which killed at least 89 of its troops at a barracks in the occupied Donetsk region of Ukraine happened because its soldiers have been using their mobile phones there, defying a ban. It's the largest single number of fatalities that Russia has admitted to in the war. Ukraine claims hundreds more were actually killed. Much of the fighting now is centred around the city of Bakhmut, here in the Donetsk region of the Donbass. The battle there has been described as a meat grinder with high numbers of casualties on both sides. Almost all of the city's 70,000 occupants have fled. Russia is working hard to capture Bakhmut in the hope that it could lead to the fall of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk as well, the two most important cities in the Donbass still under Ukrainian control. But Ukrainian forces are holding firm. Our correspondent Yugita Limai has been on the front line in Bakhmut and sent this report.
This is what the merciless bombardment of a city looks like. And how it sounds. Once a quiet place known for sparkling wine, Bakhmut is now a byword for war and Ukraine's resistance. Russia is using all its might to try and take this city. We drove past abandoned buildings. 90% of the people have fled. This is what you can see everywhere in Bakhmut, destruction. On the other side of the road you can see apartment blocks that are completely destroyed. We're walking all over shards of glass. Pretty much every second you hear the sound of artillery fire. You can tell every minute that this is a city that is being intensely fought over. And over the past few months of fierce battle, even though it's at an important road intersection, it is the symbolic importance of this fight that has become greater than its strategic location. Bakhmut is the home Anatoly has known all his life. We see him barely react when a shell lands a few hundred meters away. He's come to an aid centre, a lifeline for those still here. Why don't you leave? We asked him.
I have nowhere to go. I am alone. Who would want to take an 86-year-old? Here at least sometimes, when the soldiers throw away food or soup, I find it and eat it. And I get free bread. In my whole life, I've never seen anything like this.
Tetiana Sherbak used to be a midwife before the war. Now she's a volunteer.
I stay because I'm needed here. Of course I'm scared. I've been caught in shelling 3 times. I suffered a concussion. But what use will I be hiding in a basement? People stay for different reasons.
The explosions don't stop, but no one flinches. It's as if they've become numb. Running from bombs every day. Repeated trauma without an end. Olha Tupikova told us she and her daughter live like mice, running out quickly to get bread. Walking to this centre for a bit of food is a risk they take to survive. Outside we met Alexei Reva, the mayor of Bakhmut. We can't show his location. It is my job, my life, my fate to stay here. I won't leave the people, and I trust that Ukraine's military won't allow my city to fall, he said. We went to see Ukrainian defense, taken to a location we can't disclose. Underground to one of their command centers in the city. The heart of the military operation. Few journalists have been here. This is a live feed from drones beyond the eastern edge of Bakhmut, where Russian forces are stationed. The men here are trying to locate the target for an assault team that's just gone out. Commander Skala, as he wants to be called, told us this is the toughest battle he's ever fought.
We haven't seen enemy troops like this before. Their soldiers openly advance under fire, even if they're littering the ground with their bodies, even if only 20 are left of their 60 men. It is very difficult to hold against such an invasion. A few weeks ago, we had to withdraw from the eastern approaches to the city to save our soldiers.
They showed us this video, the east of the city on New Year's morning under Russian attack. In the fields outside Bakhmut, we see the daily grind to keep a hold on it. The winter makes it harder to camouflage guns and men. We watch them fire Soviet-era weapons. Soldiers tell us they work well and do the job. But modern equipment would help push through the deadlock on the ground. On the other end isn't just the Russian military. There are also thousands of mercenaries from the private Wagner group. They expect incoming fire, so we retreat to a bunker.
Why does it feel like it's deadlocked on the ground?
It's stuck for many reasons. The winter makes it harder to use equipment. We also have a shortage of weapons and ammunition. 21-year-old Alexander replies. Back to positions they go. Each side trying to wear the other down. In this battle of endurance. Yogita Lamai, BBC News, Bakhmut.
Yogita Lamai there reporting from the front line in eastern Ukraine. In other news today, households stepped up their borrowing against their homes in November as the cost of living crisis intensified. The Bank of England released figures today showing that individuals borrowed an extra £4.4 billion in additional home loans compared to £3.6 billion in October. The environmental campaign group Friends of the Earth says it will be taking legal action against the government's decision to approve a new coal mine. The facility in Cumbria is expected to extract nearly 2.8 million tonnes of coal per year for use in steelmaking rather than power generation. The price of fresh food rose by a record 15% in December, up from just over 14% in November, according to the British Retail Consortium. It marks the highest monthly inflation rate for fresh foods since records began in 2005. Many small towns and local high streets are busier than they were 3 years ago because of the pandemic, according to new research. Kirby on Merseyside has seen the largest increase, with visitor numbers up almost 160% compared with 2019. But major urban centres like the City of London have seen footfall drop by 50%. David Silito has been to parts of Devon where there's been a post-lockdown boom.
Welcome to Ottery St Mary in Devon and the Volunteer Inn. I popped in at a lunchtime to have a chat with Mike and Jackie who run the pub, but as you can see, they were rushed off their feet.
We weren't quite ready for how busy we've been since coming out of lockdown.
So compare 2019 with now?
There isn't no comparison, I don't think. We were so much busier.
And down the road in Budleigh Salston, the beachfront cafe is for the first time opening through the winter. Budleigh, Ottery and scores of other towns and neighbourhoods are now busier than they were in 2019. The footfall analysis has been carried out by data analysts Placemake.
So there have been several striking trends. To begin, the high street is not dead. And in fact, many places are now even more active than before, essentially a burgeoning localism. Residents are spending more time at home and in their local communities.
However, it's a very different story in big city centres, especially the City of London. It is just after 5 o'clock. This is the Bank of England, the City of London, and what used to be called the rush hour. Have a look at this. This is London Bridge in 2019 at rush hour. And this is a Friday rush hour in 2022. Placemake says footfall has dropped by more than 50%, and while some places are still crowded, property companies are planning for a future based around a new office week.
What we see is Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays incredibly busy. Mondays, 50 to 60% of those days. Friday is almost like another weekend day.
So, a new normal for now. Less commuting, more time in our own neighbourhoods. It could be worse. David Sillito, BBC News, Budleigh Salterton.
The author, Faye Weldon, who was best known for books including The Life and Loves of a She-Devil, has died at the age of 91. The prolific writer published more than 30 novels during her career, as well as collections of short stories, films for television and pieces of journalism. Our arts correspondent Rebecca Jones looks back at her life.
Faye Weldon wrote playful, punchy tales in which women were exploited by men, though they often got their own back. In praxis, the pregnant heroine receives an awful warning from an older woman.
It's only the fear of pregnancy which keeps girls on the straight and narrow.
She was brought up in New Zealand. A portrait of Faye and her sister hangs in the country's National Gallery. She came to Britain at 15.
Now, nobody has understood this. We failed miserably.
She first made her name as an advertising copywriter. Go to work on an egg was one of hers. She later claimed her advertising success was down to luck. But life wasn't easy. A single mother in her early 20s, Faye Weldon then briefly married an older man who wouldn't sleep with her.
Amazing how one unseen person can do so much to spoil a life.
After marrying again, she began writing TV plays and novels while she was pregnant.
You are clumsy. I am not clumsy. I did it by
She wrote about class, the sexual revolution and the supernatural.
You'd better keep that.
But it's your wedding ring.
Her best-known novel, The Life and Loves of a She-Devil, in which a woman takes revenge on her unfaithful husband, was adapted for television. It cemented her reputation as one of Britain's foremost feminist writers. Puffball, one of her best novels, later became a film. Yet as she got older, her views of women's roles shifted.
It wasn't just feminism that changed things. It was technology. It was birth control. It was all kinds of other factors. I mean, sometimes I think feminism was just a sort of cloak under which capitalism sort of crept up on us all and turned us into a consumer society and made us all go out to work and exhausted us.
Later in life, she urged women to pick up their husbands' socks. Some feminists accused her of betrayal. She felt her job was done. What drove me to feminism 50 years ago, she wrote, was the myth that men were the breadwinners and women kept house and looked pretty. That myth finally exploded, and I helped to explode it.
Faye Weldon, who has died at the age of 91. Never give up. That's what England's Michael Smith says after he became world champion and world #1 at darts last night. After a run of defeats last year, he started 2023 with a thrilling 9-dart finish as he beat the 3-time champion Michael van Gerwen at the PDC World Championships in London. Our sports correspondent Laura Scott reports.
Michael Smith, world champion at last. Twice he'd come agonisingly close, but third time did prove a charm for the man from St Helens. And now he's finally won it, it's clear he's not taking his eyes off this prize.
I think I left about 12:15 to come back to the hotel. Hotel bar was shut at 11, so I just went straight to my room and I literally opened the cabinet with the trophy and I just stared at the trophy for 7 hours.
3-time champion Michael van Gerwen was the man to beat, and the Dutchman had his chances. Together they produced a final for the history books, but it was Smith who delivered perfection under pressure, landing a 9-dart finish, cool as you like, hailed by some as the greatest ever leg of darts, and sending the Alexandra Palace into pandemonium. After a night of sporting theatre that he and they will never forget, he sealed an outrageous, overdue victory and promised there'll be more to come.
I've worked so hard for this, to have this title, to have this where I knew I could be, and to get it now, I don't want to slip, I don't want to let go, I want to try to do what Michael van Gerwen did and try to dominate the sport for years now.
While he says his 2 children remain his greatest achievements, as sporting memories go, he acknowledged this would never be topped. Laura Scott, BBC News.
And finally, to a fox with just 2 legs. You can imagine the surprise when a family in Derbyshire spotted this in their back garden. It was filmed in Ilkeston. They're used to seeing foxes there, but not like this one. But it was out there for at least half an hour, playing and foraging for food. We have no idea what actually happened to the animal, but Derbyshire Wildlife Trust says the fox appears to be relatively healthy and has adapted well to life on 2 legs. It certainly has. Extraordinary footage. Let's have a look at the weather now with Chris Fawkes.
Hi Sophie, I thought you were going to say from a fox to a fawkes, but anyway, weather-wise, we've seen a few showers around today, but no huge rainfall amounts. Despite that, though, there are actually 23 flood warnings currently in force, most of them across southern England, and that really is a sign of just how saturated the ground is at the moment. And if we take a look out in the Atlantic, we've got low pressures on the way. This lump of cloud is going to bring some strong winds tomorrow night. This area of cloud near Canada is set to bring some heavy rain Friday night and into Saturday, and that could pose the threat of some more flooding. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Now, overnight tonight, a few showers around initially, but then the skies tend to clear. Now, it's not too cold tonight. There'll be a few patches of frost in Scotland, but otherwise temperatures around about 5 to even 10 degrees Celsius in the south by the end of the night. Now, tomorrow, a bright enough start to the day, should see some sunshine before the weather tends to cloud over from the west, and ultimately we've got some rain on the way. The wettest weather for Northern Ireland and western areas of Scotland, with the winds picking up as the day progresses. It's another very mild day. Temperatures up to 13 in London. Well, that's 6 degrees Celsius above the average for this time of the year. Then we'll have some strong winds tomorrow night. Gales, even severe gales, affecting the northwest of Scotland, with plenty of heavy showers working in here. And it stays quite blustery across Scotland for Friday as well. But elsewhere, a brighter day with much more in the way of sunshine. It's still mild air that we have with us. And so through Friday afternoon, those temperatures quite widely still into double figures, maybe 8s and 9s across into Scotland. Now, leaving Friday behind is Friday night and into Saturday. That area of low pressure I showed you is set to bring a zone of heavier rain in. Now, this could cause problems across parts of England and Wales. Given that the ground is saturated, we might well see some localised flooding problems building in. The worst of the rain does clear through, though, as we head into the first part of the weekend, followed by showers. And as cooler air flows into parts of the north of the UK, temperatures at least drift down a little bit close to average, but it's still very mild across England and Wales. Sophie.
Chris, thank you. And that is it from us. The news does, of course, continue here on BBC One, because it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.